Okay, so what I'm doing here today is a bit of an experiment with my dough. I normally do about a 60 to a 64% hydration Caputo flour dough, which I then cold ferment in the fridge for 24 hours minimum, but normally 48 to 60 hours, about 2.5 days, 2 to 2.5 days I normally ferment. I'm trying something new here today. I'm still doing my normal Caputo blend at 64% hydration. So here I've got 800 grams of Caputo, a double O of course, 510 odd grams of water, and 3 grams of salt, so about 20 grams of salt, and some instant dry yeast. I've mixed that all up, which is going to give me a mix of about 1.35 kilos that I hope to make about 260, 265 gram dough balls out of. I'm going to ferment this time, not in the fridge. I'm in Sydney and it's quite cold in Sydney at the moment. You know, the nights are getting down to about 7, 8, even lower degrees Celsius. So now that I've mixed this up, I am going to, it's just gone straight into the food processor mixer with the dough hook. I've mixed it up. I'm now going to leave this overnight. It's now 7 p.m. at night Sydney time. I'm going to leave it till about 8, 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So it's going to have 13, 14 hours of just a room temperature ferment in a cold, dry, dark area. At that point, I'm going to take it out of its rise, give it a little tiny knead, form my dough balls, let my dough balls then sit once again at room temperature covered, let them rise till I'm ready to cook, which is going to be tomorrow, probably at about 5 p.m. in the afternoon. I will cook my pizzas, so then they will have somewhere in the vicinity of 8 to 9 hours rising in their dough balls once again tomorrow, and we'll see how that works out. Okay, I've just taken the dough out of the bowl of my mix master and or KitchenAid, whatever you want to call them. Given it about just only a minute, 2 minutes of kneading by hand, and I do that just because I like to feel in my hands the texture to see if the texture, the pliability and the moisture content of the dough is about where I want it, and you sort of get a feel for it over time for the sort of dough texture that you like to work with. And I'm left with a dough ball of 1.33 kilos, and that was with 800 grams of flour. So I'm aiming to get 5 dough balls out of here. So as you can see, I'm pretty much going to end up with 265 gram dough balls, I reckon. That's about where we're going to be, 265 grams, which is probably a good size to get yourself a nice, you know, sort of 10-inch pizza with a thin Neapolitan, puffy, fluffy crust. Now I'm going to chuck it back in the bowl, cover it, rub it just with a little bit of flour. I don't rub it in olive oil, I just coat it in flour, cover it with some cling wrap, and we'll see what it looks like in the morning. Now you can see how crazy I am about ensuring that moisture or air does not get to this dough. There is my dough, which I have just slightly rubbed in flour, put it back in the mixing bowl, and you can see the amount of cling wrap I've got in there covering it. I don't want any air getting to that thing, no moisture. I want it sitting in there, and in the cool, dark environment I'm going to put it in now. I just want it to rise overnight and have a look at it again in the morning. Okay, it's now the next morning. It's about 9 a.m. Had a bit of sleep in this morning. So this dough has been rising now for 14 hours, just in a cool, dry place. No fridge or anything, just in the same bowl. Now, if you look back at the video, you would have seen it would have been a dough ball about, looking at the size of this bowl, it was about maybe a quarter to a third the size of the bowl, the dough ball. It's reached right to the top, pushing the cling film out. So now I'm going to grab it out of there and I'm going to form my dough balls. I've just tipped the dough out of the bowl. I've got to say, it feels really wet, but that's not a bad thing. It just seems to have grown so much, and it's so light, airy, and fluffy. You can see it pooling there and the stringiness of it. The glutens have really reacted in this dough. The other lovely thing was that I just pulled it away from the edges of the dough so that it would fall out nicely. And as I pulled it out, it really just came straight off the edge. And remember, I used no oil when I put this in the bowl, just a light, really light rubbing all the way around in flour. And it just came away beautifully from the bowl. Virtually no need for any oil. And then when you look inside the bowl, you can see how it's come away. I haven't rubbed those edges at all. It's come away from that bowl clean as. And the texture of it, see, it feels a little bit sticky, but just so elastic. This is going to be a great dough to play with. I'm going to form my dough balls up. Like I said, it's just after 9 o'clock. I intend on baking these at about 5 o'clock this afternoon, 5:30. So it's going to get now another 8 hours once I've balled it up, sitting in my proofing tray, ready for tonight. Okay, so just using my handy dough scraper cutter there, just broken my dough into 5, which I'm going to run dough balls. As you can see there, 266 on that ball. Sorry, this is clumsy, but I'm using one hand on holding my phone and one doing this. 262 on that one. What have we got there? 263. So I mean, I've lost probably a couple of grams of evaporation, I'd say, not much. 266 on that one, because they should have been all at least 265. 265 there. So even if I broke up the 1 or 2 grams extra here or there, probably lost about 2 or 3 grams by evaporation. I've got a proper pizza dough proofing tray, which I bought from the pizza supply shop. They were cheap, plastic. They weren't expensive. And line that with a bit of flour. Roll these into balls. Cover it again with cling wrap. And there we are. There's my 5 dough balls rolled back into little doughs. I got to say, these things, 64% hydration, fermented at room temperature for 12 hours. And like I said earlier, it's pretty cold in Sydney. We're getting down to 5, 6, 7 even degrees Celsius at night. The dough in the hands feels like it's out of the fridge. I've just stored them in a cool, dry place, actually under my stairs, where there's no light and it's really dark, wrapped in the cling wrap, of course, in the bowl. Put them into that tray. You can see lightly flour underneath. Made these dough balls. It feels, the dough, just amazingly light and fluffy and soft in the hand. So now that I've made these 5 dough balls, I'm just going to cover it in cling wrap again, let them sit there. I reckon they're going to more than double in size again by tonight. It's going to be great to see how these things stretch out and then how they cook up in my wood fire oven. But just from the feeling of the dough in the hands, I think they're going to be pretty sensational. I think we're going to get a really, really nice, light, fluffy, thin Neapolitan dough crust out of these puppies. So there they all are. They're all wrapped up now in the cling wrap. Be generous with your cling wrap. I've got about 4 wraps around there. You don't want air getting in there. You don't want air circulating around them and drying and forming a crust. Keep them nice and dry, and you'll find you'll need no olive oil whatsoever, and they will just be absolutely brilliant. I think these are going to make a really good sourdough crust, or sourdough flavoured sort of smelling, tasting, chewy crust, because the aroma coming out of that dough, just the way it is, it just feels so much like a good sourdough, although sourdough does take a lot longer, but it's getting that way, so I think it's going to be a pretty good crust when we're done. Okay, it's now 3:30 in the afternoon. So we made this dough just on 7 p.m. last night. We left it in a ball, in a cool, dry place. It grew 3 to 4 times. We attacked it at 9 a.m. this morning after 14 hours of at a room temperature rise, but the room temperature here is about 7 or 8 degrees Celsius at the moment. We then balled it up and we put it into this tray, and you'd see from earlier in the video how small those balls were. Those balls have probably now just over doubled in size. All 5 balls are fully filling this container. I would say they're about 12 centimetres in diameter, approximately each ball, and they're a good 4 to 5 centimetres high. 3:30 in the afternoon now, so since we made it, it's about 21 hours. We intend on cooking it about 5:30, So about another hour or two sitting here, and then we'll start making our pizzas.